Thank you very much, Lascan Corla. And just on the issues that were raised just now by Deputy McConalogue, I will be addressing those towards the end of my contribution. But I do want to assure the House that those investigations are ongoing. I want to begin by saying that I think it's very important and good that we finally have the Mahon report on the Planning Tribunal for debate in the House today. It's a very significant and important debate which will be the historical point of departure in responding to the analysis, findings and recommendations of the Mahon report. And I want to make it quite clear that this report will be the basis for action. And we will make sure that the kind of climate that existed will never exist again, whereby corrupt manipulation of the political and the planning system was able to occur in this country. We will make sure that that can never happen again. And I want to reassure the House that I regard the report as a historic opportunity for both myself as Minister for Planning and Minister Hogan as Minister for the Department of the Environment, Community and Local Government to mark a point of departure between what has gone before and what is to come. I want to repeat here in this House the core element of my initial public response statement to the Mahon report. The evidence given during the hearings and the conclusions of the report have rightly apportioned blame to those who received corrupt payments, frustrated the work of the Tribunal and undermined our planning process. Planning corruption is not a faceless crime. It affects the welfare of families and communities for decades. And I am determined to act on its conclusions to ensure that our planning system is designed and operated in the interests of the country and the community and not of developers. Both I and Minister Hogan are keenly aware of the strong relationship between the needs to have an effective planning system and to overcome our economic challenges and prepare for our country's economic recovery. I also want to underscore the strong synergy between the planning recommendations of the Mahon report and recent and ongoing reforms to the legislative underpinning and operation of planning in this country. Since the consolidation of planning legislation in 2000 and the publication of the National Spatial Strategy in 2002, followed by the introduction of regional planning guidelines in 2004 and substantially revised in 2010, while more progress is needed, extensive efforts have been made in ensuring a more strategic approach to planning, one where the debate is less about whose field is to be zoned and more about where places are going in the longer term. And that progress has to continue. The 2006 Planning and Development Strategic Infrastructure Act established statutory recognition of the National Spatial Strategy, and the 2010 Planning and Development Amendment Act provided further amplification. In this regard, the 2010 Act has strengthened regional coordination, delivered better alignment of planning nationally, regionally and locally, introduced a new requirement for core strategies into the development plan process, a process that local authorities are strongly engaging with, recognising the need for a stronger plan-led, strategic, phased approach to development, which will facilitate careful management of and prudent investment in infrastructure provision at a time of acute pressure on the public finances. I fundamentally believe that taking account of both the Tribunal's findings and recent experiences, that better planning will be achieved. Where there is an evidence-based approach and future needs, whether for housing, office space, retailing or infrastructure, is agreed strategically and matched by strategic planning at government level through the appropriate national strategies and sectoral investment plans, where we refocus on revitalising our city and town centres, moving against the tendency of the Celtic Tiger era to envisage extensive, sprawling extensions of our cities and towns, drawing the lifeblood out of older, established central urban areas, where local authorities use the core strategy approach to tackle the legacy of historical and systemic overzoning, ensuring that all zoning is based on a quantitative need that is community-based rather than developer-led, and where we move instead towards a more coordinated and joined-up approach to the delivery of essential public services such as schools, public transport, water services, using the local plan as the template. And I want to take this opportunity to outline some initiatives that I have been involved in during the short period since I took office and which are pointers for the way forward. Firstly, I expect shortly to receive the Regional Planning Guidelines Implementation Annual Report 2011, which has been prepared by the 8 regional authorities, having particular regard to the core strategy provision of the Planning and Development Amendment Act 2010, ensuring proper oversight of the alignment of plans at national, regional and local level. The report of the regional authorities will, I believe, indicate that serious progress is being made and must continue to be made in tackling our addiction to zoning. The 2010 Act was aimed at decreasing the need for ministerial intervention in development plans and local area plans by providing clarity in the legal responsibilities of planning authorities to have reasonable and evidence-based plans rather than relying on the Minister's intervention in the plan process. But I want to make it quite clear that this does not automatically rule out the need for my future intervention, particularly in the context of the ensuring local and development plans are consistent, and I will be closely monitoring their consistency with the now adopted core strategies in development plans. Secondly, I will also shortly be launching an innovative planning information system that for the first time in this country will draw together on the internet and accessible to the public all the zoning maps of every development plan and local area plan in the country. The system will enable a much more open and transparent system for tracking the integration of plans across the country and is, I believe, a game changer in terms of how the public will view the operation of the forward planning system, and I will be announcing that very shortly. Therefore, it is important to recall, as the Tribunal did, that there are fundamental differences between the current planning regime and that prevailing at the time the Planning Tribunal first started its work 15 years ago. However, I agree with the Tribunal that while recent progress is welcome, we can and must go further. Accordingly, looking more closely at the 10 planning recommendations of the Mahon report, Recommendation 2 in relation to regional authorities will be considered in the context of Minister Hogan's forthcoming policy proposals for further local government reform, including the regional dimension. Recommendations 3 and to an extent 8 in relation to regional and local authority procedures have already been acted upon in recent legislative amendments. Recommendation 4 is a matter for the Minister for Transport, and he is aware of that. Other recommendations propose sensible improvements to improve accountability, transparency and fairness in the planning process that I believe we would all largely agree on. But we must study them closely and consider them carefully as we prepare to respond to them in greater detail. And I've already met with officials and will be meeting with them again next week in order to progress these recommendations, which are particularly in the Department of Planning, in our Department of Environment, Community and Local Government. However, it is without question that the most fundamental recommendation is for the establishment of an independent planning regulator. In this one recommendation, the Mahon Tribunal is essentially saying to legislators such as ourselves that notwithstanding the roles of local authorities and the Minister and progress made in recent years in tightening up a previously lax system, planning, especially the forward planning process, needs independent oversight with the appropriate legal mandate and resources to determine whether or not plans are in compliance with legal requirements.
2 minutes remaining.
How long?
2 minutes.
2 minutes, okay. And if not, to determine what intervention may be necessary where serious policy departures have taken place or where there is a strong evidence base of bad practice or systemic failure. In other words, the Tribunal's assessment is that Ireland needs to introduce an element of independent review of forward planning and planning administration practices in the manner that An Bord Pleanála undoubtedly delivers in overseeing our independent planning applications appeals. And I intend to look at that recommendation and consult in relation to it. And my main focus in all of this is to improve accountability and transparency. But in relation to the short term, the members of this House will also be mindful of the legacy planning complaints just referred to by the previous deputy, for which the former Minister Gormley had previously announced a planning review which was intended to assess the application of planning legislation, policy and guidance within the development plan and development management systems at local level and to inform further policy development in these areas. A number of planning authorities representing a broad geographical spread of both urban and rural areas, as well as both large and small authorities, had been selected to assist in the review of policies and practices by reference to a number of cases raised with my department. And I want to assure you that work is ongoing on this, and I have urged my officials to complete it as urgently as possible. And once it is completed, I will issue a public statement, including any appropriate actions to be pursued in regard to further policy developments and guidance, while also taking account of the need to develop wider proposals for improving the transparency and openness of the planning system, as recommended in the report of the Mahon Tribunal. Now, I just want to make it clear, Minister Gormley did not establish any investigations. He set up a panel of consultants who would be available to carry out investigations. He went out of office in January of 2011 without establishing any of these investigations. He was subsequently succeeded by Eamon O'Keefe as Minister until the fall of the last government. He also did not initiate any investigations. My predecessor then, in conjunction with Minister Hogan, asked for a review within the department, which is ongoing, which I will publish, the findings of which I will publish when it's available. And if it is necessary and if it is appropriate, on the basis of what's in that information, I will instigate investigations. And I can assure you of that, because I intend, as Minister with responsibility for planning, to ensure that we have a fair, open and transparent system of planning in this country, in which people can be confident and depend on that it will deliver the sustainable communities and quality of life for which we all strive and which people deserve. So I want to thank the members of the Tribunal for their work over the years, and I do see this as a historic debate that is, I hope, closing a very ugly, distasteful and damaging chapter in the history of this country.
Thank you, Minister.
I certainly look forward to playing my part in ensuring that we have an open, transparent system into the future without corruption.
Now call on Deputy Senator McLeod.